So, I recently did a video about the reported Nintendo Switch hardware upgrade coming next year, as have many others, and the most talked about subject coming out of it has been the possible power increase. Shocker, I would have never guessed. How powerful should it be? How powerful does it need to be to justify an upgrade? That sort of stuff. So in this video, I want to address specifically that aspect and elaborate more on my thoughts and concerns with it. Now, as I stated in that video, I do like the idea of getting games to run better, specifically those more demanding titles. The stuff stuck at 30 frames per second, often not a stable 30, I'd like to see bumped up to 60. I'm always more of a frame rate guy than resolution. Nothing to me is more jarring and immersion breaking to me than poor frame rates in games. But resolution as well could use some help. Now sure, the buzzword here is 4K. After viewing some of the discussions about this, I saw a lot of 4K talk. Personally, I would make 1080p 60 frames per second the target. 4K upscaling is possible, sure, but I think as we've seen with other consoles, this focus would keep the frame rates down. Personally, I just think 1080p 60 is the sweet spot. Even on a 4K display, when there's the option for these enhanced PS4 Pro and Xbox One X games, I always prefer to run them in their performance mode for the higher frame rate, and I think it looks way better and smoother than, say, a picture mode that runs at 4K and an often unstable 30. But with the Switch, I totally admit the resolution can look rough with the current model, especially on larger displays. But I think a 1080p target would fix that, and I don't think 4K would be necessary. Now, I'm not totally against it if they can keep the proper frame rates, and I would say even go as far to include 4K for at least the video apps and stuff, your YouTube, Hulu, Netflix. I think it would be a great idea to get 4K in there for those. But overall, yeah, I totally don't think 4K is something we really need on this hybrid. Now, with the power comes the possibility for it to run new games that maybe weren't possible on the older model. This has been probably the most contended point on this whole thing. On one hand, yes, you could get games that you would never be able to play otherwise, but on the other, you're dividing the player base. Just as I said in my original video, this is something I would probably consider at some point, but not in 2019. Not 2.5 years into the console's life. I think that's too early. And what I think people are kind of overestimating here is exactly how attractive this hardware upgrade would be to game developers. Oh, now they can bring all their games over. First off, I think a lot of these games could already come over to the current Switch if developers and publishers really wanted to. Some of the stuff we do see come over, the Bethesda games, even something like Fortnite, allowing 100 players on one map simultaneously. A lot of these games should make you kind of scratch your head and be like, how is this game here when these other guys say their game isn't possible on the Switch? And two, this is very important. You're essentially starting over. If the current system can't run your game, then all the Switch sales up to this point, up to the point of that next Switch release, are not potential buyers because these games will be exclusive to the new Switch. I'm going to use the term exclusive a lot here, but not like exclusive from all other systems, exclusive to the new Switch and not playable on the original. Only people who buy this new version are going to be possible buyers for your game. And going off the sales of things like the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X, while they don't have exclusive games that aren't playable on the past models, they are similar hardware refreshes. And yeah, going off those sales, I don't think that's something you want to bet on, as with the Xbox One X and the PS4 Pro, it was the cheaper, more budget models that continued to sell more, even after these more powerful counterparts came out. And with getting these third-party exclusives, again, games that would be on this new Switch but not the old Switch, I think this would have a high chance of causing sort of a chicken versus the egg issue. Developers are going to want to wait for that install base to grow before they port their games over, so they actually have players to sell them to. This is basically what we've seen with the current Switch, right? How many devs seem to wait until after Switch units were flying off the shelves to commit to bringing their game over? But here, current Switch users are going to be waiting, just playing their current Switch, for these new Switch games to come out to justify an upgrade. Normally with consoles, that's where the first party stuff comes in to get people to buy. But oh man, do I think Nintendo would be raked over the coals if they tried to make some of their games exclusive to this new system, again, after such a short time. I mean, just imagine them coming out and being like, oh yeah, that new Pokemon RPG that we've been talking up, that's exclusive to the new Switch now. Or Metroid Prime 4, get hyped to finally play it, of course, only on the new Switch. The Nintendo headquarters would be burned to the ground that night, so I don't think that's an option. Now, there have been discussions about workarounds for this, like potentially a more powerful dock that allows you to play these new Switch games on the current Switch. You just have to play them while docked. While I do like the more powerful dock idea, again, perhaps to boost performance, I never want to be chained to it, as that defeats the entire purpose of the Switch. It's similar to why I don't like cloud gaming on Switch. It's actually a lot worse. The cloud stuff requires you to be within range of a strong, stable internet connection, where requiring a more powerful dock to play games basically makes it a home console, like everything else. Except I'll tell you one thing, if I have to play on the dock, I'm sure as hell not paying $60 for a game like Wolfenstein 2 when I can get it for like $20 or less on every other platform. The reason we justify a lot of these prices is specifically because of portability. So yeah, I don't really think anything that compromises portability on the Switch is a good business decision. That's the main selling point. And just think about the market confusion with something like that. You know, mom and dad are out buying little Timmy Switch games or a Switch console for Christmas, and the person working at the store has to give them the whole rundown like, oh, well, you're going to need this Switch if you want to play these games over here. They don't work on this other older Switch. Well, they do kind of work on it. You would have to buy this dock that's right here, and you wouldn't be able to play these games portable on the old system because you need the dock. You'll only be able to play them on that, and it has to be on even days of the month and also a full moon that night. It's too complicated. But again, something like we have now with the other systems, you know, just saying this one is more powerful and runs the games better, and that makes it more expensive. Pretty simple and I think reasonable. And speaking of cost, let's not forget about that. Nintendo gets a huge portion of its market share in the gaming industry from being the cheaper option. It's pretty much expected at this point that when Nintendo comes out with a new system, it's going to be cheaper than the others. You go too crazy with this new Switch in 2019, how much is this thing going to cost? If they get near the range of the PS5 and the next Xbox, I think that would be a big oof. So yeah, overall, like I said in my last video, I'm fine with the idea of a more powerful Switch coming in 2019. It makes a lot of sense to me to do something as we start hearing about the PS5 and the next Xbox, but I think going too far into almost a Switch 2 territory, dividing the player base so early, is just going to result in being a major turnoff for consumers. I mean, if this did happen, a more powerful Switch gets released like 2 or 2.5 years after the initial launch with exclusive games that aren't playable on this current one, how could I cover Nintendo and recommend that new system after like 1 year? Being honest, I'd have to tell people like, oh, we're a year in. If you're looking to buy the new Switch, you should probably just wait another year because we may get yet another refresh. And that's going to have games that this Switch can't play. And everyone who just bought in up to that point is going to feel gypped, and rightfully so. I don't think it would be a good business strategy. I don't think it's going to get as many developers on board as a lot of people think. Just having more power doesn't mean anything if the install base isn't there. I could build the most powerful console ever, runs every game in 4K, 120 frames per second, and have one, and be like, okay, I have the most powerful system, everyone port your games over. And they're going to be like, we're not going to port our game over for not even one sale, one potential sale. We need millions and millions, so we have millions of potential sales, which will probably result in only a few 100,000. That install base is going to have to be there, and you're starting from scratch if it's a new system and these games are only playable on that system. And like I also said, I think Nintendo's hands are going to be tied in terms of putting their own games exclusive to the new system because, yeah, fans will just uprise at that point. I do think this makes sense down the line. I've said I think the Switch is a golden idea, something they should stick with and build off of, and I would say give the system like 4 or 5 years on the market, then do a major upgrade. This way, we'll be deep into the lives of the next gen Xbox and PlayStation, and that way Nintendo could release something better equipped to compete with those systems. 2.5 years though, to me, just seems too soon to make a huge leap. But with that, this video is a wrap. Let me know your thoughts on potentially dividing Switch players with new hardware next year in the comments. Do you think it's too soon, or is it worth the risk to possibly get more games on it? Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this latest discussion on a potential new Switch. Yeah, in general, I think you can expect there to be lots of talk about all the upcoming hardware around here. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, and if you want to keep the conversation going, hit me up on Twitter at Johnny Zakari, and join my Discord, Shy Guy and Friends, linked to both in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching.